Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever this happens to find you. This is Michael Halper with Sales Scripter, and this is the kickoff of our 15-week sales training webinar series. And the motivation for putting all of this together is that I recently published the book, The Smart Sales System. If you've followed us for any amount of time, you probably have noticed that I've written a few ebooks. I wrote the book, The Cold Calling Equation, in 2012. And during the past 10 years, I've written hundreds of blog posts and dozens of webinar training sessions. And basically what I tried to do is bring all of that together into one book. I also kind of updated a lot of the suggestions and scripts and tactics. And one thing that I'm really proud of is I really put a lot of effort to create a system. So system is the key word with this book and everything we're going to talk about here for the next 15 weeks, quite frankly, in that I feel very confident that this is not just a sales training book or a sales training program. This is a system, and it's something that all of the tips and tactics are structured in a way that you can easily adopt them and implement them in the same way that you would implement a system in your life or download an application to your computer or to your phone and then use it daily to change your behavior and change your results and improve your results. So we'll talk about a lot of that here today, and like I said, for the remainder of the 15-week training program. If you want to get your copy of the Smart Sales System book, here is a link to our page on Amazon where you can order your copy. Here is the schedule for the 15 weeks. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to go through the Smart Sales System Smart Sales System book, chapter by chapter. And so just sit back and we'll go through the book kind of in audio format. I'm not going to read the book, but hit all of the key points of each chapter and whatnot. So this is our schedule for the next 15 weeks. By the way, while we're looking at the schedule, I want to just maybe call out the elephant in the room. And I'm well aware that we're kicking this off while there's a lot of uncertainty regarding the coronavirus. And while we don't really know what the short and long-term impacts of that will be, one thing I want to touch on a few 2 to 3 things of how that applies to what we're talking about here. First of all, unfortunately, there's probably going to be some economic slowdown and slowdown in terms of your activity if you're a salesperson, if only because you might not travel as much, you might not be going to conferences in the next short to midterm, business transactions might get put on hold. So that while that is incredibly bad news, what that presents is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for you to work on yourself in this kind of what you might call slower period. I would recommend you work on yourself in terms of professional and even personal development so that when we get back to business as normal, you can perform at a higher level. So this is a really great time for you to work on your sales skills, whether that's using our training or another training system. This is a great time for you to polish up and to improve. That's not a unique recommendation. I think that you should also do that type of thing during like the end of the year when it's the holidays and business slows down. Instead of just kicking back and relaxing, that's a really great time to work on yourself, and this is an opportunity for that as well. The other thing is that it's very clear that we are moving into a world where things are going to be done more virtually, whether that might be more phone sales, more virtual meetings. And the Smart Sales System really applies to all different types of selling, but it definitely leans more towards phone sales. So what we talk about here should help you if you're going to end up transitioning more to virtual sales, phone sales. The last thing that I'll point out is that during this period, because there's a slowdown economically, you are going to face more objections. Objections like we're not doing anything because of the coronavirus, we are not, our budget has been cut, our budget has been put on hold. So those are objections, and one thing that we will really focus on with the Smart Sales System is improving how you deal with objections. So by you adopting this system and learning this methodology, you should be better prepared to deal with some of the coronavirus objections that you're sure to face. And unfortunately, that does not come until week 9. So it's about 2 months away in this training program. If you want to skip ahead, you could buy the book and read that chapter, or go to our YouTube channel, look for some of the past training webinars on dealing with objections. All right, so that being the case, what we're going to work on this week is we're going to focus on a quick introduction to the SMART sales system and also an introduction to consultative selling. To help introduce you to the SMART sales system, I want to answer 3 questions. The first one being I want to explain basically what SMART stands for in terms of our terminology. If you can't already tell, we use the word system a lot with this. And I'll explain in what exact way this is a system, and I'll just put it out there what you can expect, what the return on investment will be for you to spend your time with us during this 15-week period or adopting the SMART sales system. So basically does SMART stand for? Well, the S and the M in SMART stands for sales messaging, and this is basically, when I say sales messaging, I refer to what you say and communicate when you're talking with prospects, and that can either be over the phone, in email, voicemail, in meetings and presentations and whatnot. So everything you say, and a lot of that could either be what you're talking about regarding your product, it could be what you say to try to build interest or qualify the prospect and whatnot. Now, I feel fairly confident that we focus more on sales messaging than any other sales training program I've been exposed to or book that I've read. And I believe that what you say, the words you say, is your most powerful sales tool. There's a lot of different sales tools you can use, such as email, phone, computer, social media, email automation tools, LinkedIn, and whatnot. But those are all great tools and will improve your effectiveness and efficiency. But if you aren't saying the right things, then those won't help you much. For example, if you use an email automation tool that helps you to broadcast your message, but your email messages aren't good, then your results will be minimal. On the other hand, if you have a very strong message but you don't use great tools, you likely can perform very well. And if you combine the two of good message with great tools, then you can perform at an optimum level. So we really focus a lot on that. And like I said, I think we do this more than any other sales training program out there. The R in SMART stands for response, and this refers to how you respond to the prospect. So it's one thing to start out of the gate thinking this is what I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to talk about, but you never really know how the prospect is going to respond. So the other half of the sales message is being prepared for how to respond to your prospects, let's say, objections. So you're sure to face objections. We just talked about the coronavirus. That's just one objection you can face. I'm not available right now. I'm not interested. Just send me your information. So how are you responding to those? Are you just improvising, or are you prepared with a response that has a decent chance of keeping the conversation going? So we focus tremendously on your responses and how you respond. And by the way, it's not just responding to objections, it's also helping you to be more prepared with how you're responding to prospect questions. So there's a lot of frequently asked questions, and with those you could also just improvise, but there's also logic you can use for responding to questions in the right way. And the entire system is really filled with tactics. I believe there's a lot of sales training programs out there that talk about things at a high level, and they don't really tell you what to do. We will tell you exactly what to do. And one of the ways we do that is through this system. And so getting back to some of those other programs, there's often times where I sat through a sales training program and it was very inspiring and motivating. But when it was time to get back to my desk and time to pick up the phone, I wasn't in a better place to know what to do in terms of what to say when I called up a cold prospect. And that's because a lot of sales training materials are just fluffy and at a high level. They talk about very rough concepts and don't really talk about when you're in this situation, this is what you need to say and do. And the SMART sales system is totally different. We will tell you exactly what to say in this situation. And when you're in this situation, you should do this, or don't say this. Not to say that you'll agree with everything that we recommend or that everything we recommend is perfect, but you do not need to worry about learning about the smart sales system and then picking up the phone and not knowing what to say, or being in a presentation or facing an objection and not knowing what to do. On the other extreme, on one extreme you have very fluffy, high-level training materials that don't tell you what to do. On the other extreme, I've seen some sales training materials that are just too complex. They tell you exactly what to do, but it's too difficult and complicated to figure out how to adopt, or you need to have a certain personality in order to do what they're recommending, or a certain level of experience. An example of this is I read a book once that I thought was pretty decent, and it had like a 9-square matrix that it recommended that you go through when having appointments with clients. I thought the matrix was a pretty good idea. I liked what it would actually help you to extract from your prospects, but really figuring out how to introduce the matrix in an appointment and explain what it is and explain what you're going to do, and then figuring out what to say to go through the matrix. While it wasn't impossible, it wasn't something that I thought of, so thinking of how to go through it was just foreign and difficult to implement. So it was too complicated, and while I thought it was a good tactic, it was something I never ended up implementing. And if you go through sales training programs and you learn stuff that you don't implement, not only are you wasting your time, but you're wasting any money that you spend on that type of stuff. Well, the good thing with the smart sales system is that everything we tell you to do or tell you not to do is fairly practical and easy to implement if you choose to do it. It's not real complicated. You can implement the smart sales system regardless of your level of sales experience, sales skills, educational background, or your personality. You don't have to be a talkative person, or you don't have to be extremely charismatic. You just can follow our simple set of instructions. Another way that we can proudly say that this is a system that you can implement is that it offers a software platform that you can use in conjunction with implementing everything you learn from the book and the training. That platform you may have heard of is SalesScripter. You probably have seen that name or heard us talk about that before. But the software completely aligns with everything we're going to talk about in these training modules and everything we talk about in the book. It's optional. You don't have to purchase it, but it does help it to be what you learn here to be more of a system, because what you're learning, the software helps you to implement on a daily basis. And this does a few things. One is it makes it easy for you to implement everything we talk about. For example, we're going to talk about building your message and creating scripts. You can certainly do everything we recommend in a Microsoft Word document and create everything we talk about. But if you use the software, the documents are already created in the software, so you don't have to create all those. So it makes it easy for you to implement the smart sales system. But one thing that it does that is even more powerful is that when you typically go through a sales training workshop, you'll typically get hit with a fire hose. And you'll get hit with a fire hose of a lot of information. Typically, when you go through any kind of training, you retain a certain percentage of the information that you were exposed to, and some of it you don't retain. And in order to continue to retain the small percentage that you walk away with, you have to reinforce it on a daily basis. You have to use the terminology, you have to use the recommendations. And if you don't reinforce what you learned, you end up forgetting the portion that you actually did walk away remembering from the sales training program. So the good thing about the SalesScripter software is that it aligns with all of the training. So it is something that if you used it correctly, you would use it on a daily basis when you're prospecting. And the tool, since it uses all the same recommendations and the same tips and the same terminology, it will reinforce everything you're learning, making it much easier for you to adopt and implement all the recommendations that you learn. So what can you expect from implementing the smart sales system? So basically, our expectation is that the system will help you to become a smarter salesperson. And one of the ways that we'll do that is we're going to help you to improve your ability to know what to say in all of the common sales prospecting situations. So you'll go from improvising or being uncertain what to do and say to having confidence and clarity that you should not say this and instead say this. So we'll make that crystal clear. Because you'll be smarter and communicating better, you will make a better impression with the prospects that you end up interacting with. Because you're making a better impression, you should likely improve your ability to establish conversations, and also because we'll improve your ability to know what to say when you face objections. That will also help you to establish more conversations. Once you get into conversations and appointments and discussions with prospects, you should have better interactions overall because you're going to be asking better questions, you're going to be communicating better, you're going to be making a better impression. Because you're doing all of that, you should end up building more rapport and better relationships with prospects. You should ultimately be able to make smarter decisions. So one of the reasons, a quick example of why that might be the case is because we're going to help you to identify what questions to ask. That's going to help you to extract more information from prospects. Because you have more information, you're going to be able to make better decisions throughout the sales process and managing the sales cycles and sales process. Because of all of that, you should be able to generate more leads. And believe it or not, selling should become easier for you. One quick example why is if you become more prepared for the objections that you're going to continually face and you improve your ability to get around those, that immediately is going to make selling easier. Because instead of getting beat up and shot down, you're going to be establishing conversations. And at the end of the day, we all can sometimes feel a little anxiety when it's time to prospect, especially when it's time to pick up the phone and call cold prospects. Well, if you don't know what to say and do, and you don't know how to respond properly to objections, you can easily feel a little bit of anxiety in that situation. But if you change those scenarios to where you have confidence from knowing what to say and what to do, you can decrease the anxiety that you feel when you're selling. Now, the system is built on 3 levels, and just to go through those real quick, level 1 is basically your sales message. This is not your script, this is not your emails, this is your sales message. So every salesperson has a sales message, whether they realize it or not, whether they create one or not. There's something that they are going out there and saying. Could be just them talking about their product. What we want to do is we want to build you a good sales message that focuses not only on your product, but also on the benefits you deliver, pain points, and whatnot. We'll take you through a process to create your sales message, and that will be the foundation and level 1. On top of that, we will end up building your sales scripts. So this is where we come into creating cold call scripts and cold emails, and we basically use your sales message to create all of those documents. Once you have all that, you can move up to level 3, which is the actual methodology and processes and tips and tactics that you use when you're using your sales tools. For example, at level 2 we create your cold call script. Level 3 is where we teach you about how to cold call and what you should be doing when you're cold calling. A better example is part of level 2 are objection responses. Well, if you have objection responses for this is how to respond, but you don't really understand why you're saying that or how to say it or what to do with that objection response, they aren't going to do you much good. So what you need to do after you have your objection responses is then move to level 3 and learn our approach or a approach for how to handle objections and combine that with your objection responses. So what we'll do is we'll take you through these 3 levels. You don't have to memorize all of this and memorize what is what and what each level is. I show you this for 2 reasons. One is this is how the sales training 15-week program is organized and also how the book is organized. The first section is on your sales message. The second section is on sales tools. The third section is basically on how to sell better, right? By the way, level 3 is the bulk of the book and the bulk of the sales training program here that you're going to attend. The other thing is that I just want to point out that you can do all of this without purchasing the sales script or software application. You can create your sales message in a document. You can create the sales tools at level 2 in a document. The good thing is that Sales Scripter actually does align with all 3 of these levels. It aligns very closely with level 1, level 2, because there's actually an area in Sales Scripter called the Sales Message Builder that takes you through all the steps you need to go through for level 1. And then there's an area of Sales Scripter called the Sales Playbook, which is the level 2 documents already loaded up that get populated with your sales message. So just want to point that out. Another reason why I show these levels to you is so that you can maybe get a little more clarity around what you need to work on and what you need to do. For example, a lot of clients often come to us to help them create their cold call script. But if they come to us with that, they're coming to us and asking for help with level 2. Almost 100% of the time, we take a step back and start at level 1 to create that foundation. So before we create your script, we want to create your sales message, and then we use your message to create cold call scripts. Another example is sometimes clients come to us and want help with objection handling. So they're coming to us to work on level 3, but they haven't done the work for level 2 and level 1. In those scenarios, we go back and start at level 1 to create their message, then level 2 to create their objection responses, and then level 3 to work on how work on their approach to responding to objections. Now, there are some concepts that impact everything that we recommend you do. And these same concepts come up in throughout the different modules that we will take you through each week. So what I want to do is I want to kind of go through the core concepts here right now in a little bit of detail so that we don't have to introduce them each week. And these are the core concepts that impact all of the different tips that we're going to recommend throughout this program. The first core concept is to understand the prospect. And I take this concept from a book that I read called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. It's a great book. And one of the habits is seek first to understand in order to be understood. And this concept kind of provides some advice for dealing with people in interpersonal situations where there might be a disagreement or some sort of conflict. Some examples of where that might apply is a parent talking to a child, a spouse talking to a partner, an employer talking to an employee, or, to be honest with you, I think this really comes into play, a salesperson trying to talk to and communicate with a prospect. While that's not just a clear conflict situation where there's an argument, there is a conflict where a salesperson is trying to start a conversation and communicate with someone who is extremely busy, might be a little annoyed, might be giving objections. So I personally think that, and we will talk about understanding the prospect in almost every chapter of the book and every week that we get together here, as we can use this to improve how we communicate. So when we're thinking about what we're going to say in our message, or when we're cold calling, or when we're leaving voicemails, or when we're cold emailing, we can usually improve our ability to optimize our communication in terms of either figuring out what not to say or what to say. And in fact, probably this comes more in handy with figuring out what not to say. The next core concept is that prospects are extremely busy. So if we're taking a step back and we're trying to understand the prospect in terms of who they are, what they're going through, what they're thinking about, what they're wanting, one thing that we can start to understand is that prospects are busy, especially if you're doing B2B sales. So if you're doing B2B sales, you're likely calling at a manager level or above. They have a lot of responsibility. They have meetings on the calendar. They also have a lot of salespeople that are trying to sell to them. So it would be one thing if you were one of 2 salespeople that are calling up your prospect, but they're getting calls all day long, cold calls and cold emails. So you are part of this larger noise. Doesn't mean that you should just give up and not try, but that does add a layer of complexity and something for you to understand, in that when you reach out, you are part of this larger noise. So you can make some decisions to determine how you stand out or how you don't look like everybody else. But one thing I definitely want you to do is not look like everybody else. So one of the key concepts that I'll come back to in almost everything I recommend you do is I want you to decrease how much you sound like a salesperson that's trying to sell something. And a lot of the logic here is that if your prospects are getting sold to a lot, they might be guarded because they might be either a little annoyed or they can't be open to every communication that comes in from every single salesperson. So that's a challenge, and you can't make that go completely away. But if you understand that dynamic, that you're just one of many, you can decrease that challenge and improve the impression that you make by decreasing how much you sound like a salesperson that's trying to sell something. And I'm not wanting you to mislead and say that you do some different role or be manipulative. It's not about that. It's just about not sounding like you're a product pushing salesperson. And there are small things you can do to do that. And also, by the way, there's nothing wrong with making yourself appear as a business person, even a business person that represents a company or product that you actually sell. That's completely fine. But that is different than appearing like you're just like everybody else, all these other salespeople that are out there trying to sell something to the same people you are. In life, everybody has their own interests. If we're talking about a salesperson and a prospect, a salesperson has interests such as they want to sell their product, they want to make money, they want to hit their sales targets. A prospect has interests, and those are actually none of what I just mentioned. The prospect's interests are completely different than the salesperson's interests. The prospect wants to also sell the product or make money for their company, make money for themselves, have job security, decrease stress, decrease work life, improve their ability to provide for their family. Now, that's something to be aware of, because when someone is out there sounding like a salesperson that's trying to sell something, that salesperson is focusing on their own interests. When a salesperson is out there talking about their product and trying to get a prospect to hear about their company and hear about their product, they're focusing on their own interests. And what I want you to do is to focus on the prospect's interests. And we'll talk about how to do that. But one anecdote to show you the importance of that, in your personal life, let's say that you have a hobby of you like to play tennis, and you have a friend that likes to play golf. Well, if you like to play tennis, you likely enjoy watching tennis and talking about tennis, and you know all the main professional tennis athletes. You might find it boring when your friend talks about golf because you don't know about that, and that's not a shared interest. So this is something that you should become aware of. And if you wanted to proactively foster the relationship you have with your friend that has a different interest, you could resist your natural instinct of wanting to talk about your interests and focus more on theirs. Even if you find golf to be completely boring, if you just put golf on the TV when you're sitting watching TV with your friend, then you can make them more interested, or you can increase their level of engagement. You could do this with a friend at lunch. If you are at lunch with a friend, you know that your friend might be interested in their job, their career, their family, their kids, their hobbies, their what they like to do for fun. So if you are having lunch, if you focus more of the conversation on your friend's interests, such as asking about their kids and their vacation and their job, they will become more engaged and actually find the conversation to be more fun. And even if you end up only talking about them the whole time, they will think that you are a really interesting person to talk to. You can use that. If you agree with that dynamic, you can use that to your advantage when you're meeting with prospects and focus more of the conversation on them, their company, their interests, and less on your product and your company, or at least save that to the end. And we'll tell you about how to do all that in each week that we meet. But I'm introducing that concept, all these concepts here, so we don't have to get into that as much detail. You hopefully will know what I'm talking about when I bring all those back up. I personally believe that the best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions. Not only is that the best way to extract valuable information from your prospect, but it's also a great way to get the conversation focused on your prospect. If I go back to that same example of having lunch with the friend, the way to get the conversation on talking about them is to ask questions about their family and their kids and their job and what they do for fun. It's questions that will put the attention on them. So I personally think questions are the key to being a good salesperson. By the way, you may read that and say, oh, that makes sense, I like that, that's good. But you still could be not clear on what questions you need to ask when you're calling or meeting with prospects. Don't worry. We are going to talk about questions a ton and throughout this training, and we will make it crystal clear what questions you need to be asking prospects. I also think it's good to assume that prospects are likely not in buying mode when you send them an email, when you call them. This is not to say that you can't sell to them or that they don't need what you sell. It's just most likely the case that they're not sitting there at their computer Googling to research the area that you sell. I mean, even if it is something they might be thinking about in that general time period, just the odds of catching them at that particular time thinking about what you sell is not likely. And if you agree with that, I think that's important just to factor in terms of what you're communicating, what you're trying to do with the prospect. An example here is if you go to a trade show where you have vendors and you have people that go to the trade show to buy the vendor's products, there's a totally different dynamic there where you can communicate and skip steps and communicate in a very direct way about what you sell because the prospect is in buying mode. Or if a prospect comes into a store ready to purchase, it's a different process. But when you're doing cold prospecting, your prospect is not at that place mentally, and that's not what they're thinking about. So it's helpful to be aware of that, to modify what you try to do and what you say. One of the ways that awareness can impact you is that when you're prospecting, don't try to sell the product, sell the meeting. And to give you an example, I get emails a lot from people trying to sell web design services. These web design companies will email us and they'll say, are you looking to redo your website? Do you need to redo your website or website redesign? And when they're asking this, they're basically selling the product. They're basically saying, I sell web design. Do you need web design? Even knowing if I purchase web design from them, we would likely have to talk and have some sort of sales process. So they're selling the product. But the thing is that I'm not in buying mode for web design at the time that they send me the email. And they could greatly improve their results by, instead of selling the product, selling the meeting. And that slightly alters their message. So instead of saying, are you all looking to redo your website, saying, hey, I see you have a website. There's a couple things that caught my attention. I want to share a couple ideas with you. I know you might not be looking to redo your website. Totally fine. I just want to start the conversation. So that could be a phone call, that could be a voicemail, that could be an email, but that message is selling the meeting, not selling the product. So we will talk a lot about that, and that impacts a lot of what you say and how you respond to objections and how you communicate, and it's definitely one of the core concepts. The SMART sales system methodology is based on a consultative selling approach. And to provide a quick overview of consultative selling, first, let's start out by talking about what is not consultative selling, and this is what I refer to as product selling. And this is what I actually believe that the majority of salespeople do, and that is basically a salesperson will go out and talk about the product that they sell and the company they work for as much as they can. And they will try to do that with as many people as they can. Every chance they get, they try to talk to someone about the company they work for and the product they sell. And their real goal of every communication is to try to build and validate interest in buying the product they sell. If I go back to that example of a web design company sending an email asking, we do web design services, do you need web design services? They're basically saying what they sell, trying to build interest in what they sell, and validate that I need or want what they sell. And this is what I would consider product selling. By the way, you may look at that and think, well, that's a logical approach. I have a product to sell, so I need to talk about my product as much as I can to as many people as I can. And that does make sense. And you can sell with that approach. But the problem comes in when you factor in some of the core concepts that I mentioned in the previous chapter, and that is that prospects get sold to a lot. So if your prospects are getting sold to a lot and contacted a lot by different salespeople, and then you reach out to them with your product selling approach and message, then you increase the odds of facing resistance or turning them off. In addition, if you agree that it would be more optimum to minimize how much you sound like a salesperson trying to sell something, then that will be more difficult if you use a product selling approach. If you agree that it makes more sense to focus more on the prospect and their interests and less on you, then a product selling approach does not really comply with that, because a product selling approach is all about you. This is who I work for, this is what I sell. And if you agree that when you're doing cold prospecting, that the prospects that you reach out to and talk to are most likely not in buying mode at that particular moment, then it might be not optimum for you to always be trying to push and sell the product that you sell. So when you factor those in, then you can see that product selling can lead to some sales at some point, but there's a lot of mismatch and it creates a lot of conflict and a less than optimum situation. But the reality is that product selling, if you currently do product selling, or that's what you've done in the past, or that's what you like to do, don't feel bad, because it's actually completely understandable for the majority of salespeople to do product selling. And the reason why is because it aligns with your natural instincts. You get hired by a company, you're told to sell a product, you get paid when you sell that product. It only makes sense for you to go out and just talk about your product as much as you can. It's also how most companies train their salespeople, in that whether we're talking about new hires or periodic training, companies will often train their salespeople on these are the products you'll be selling, this is how they work, this is how they're priced, this is how you submit an order, here's your territory, now go out and sell. Or periodically, these are the new product updates, go generate leads for these new products. This is how companies really train their salespeople, so it's understandable. And also, in some ways, it's easier to be a product selling salesperson than a consultative salesperson. Well, I'll explain that and show that more later when I compare this with consultative selling. But if you need to build your sales message and you are doing product selling, then your sales message is basically talk about your product. So all you have to have is really a somewhat decent level of knowledge about the product you sell, and then you know what to say. The thing that I'll bring back to that later is that while that is it's easier in the short term to figure out what to say, it's harder in the long term, because you're going to face more resistance and more reluctance. So let's talk about consultative selling now. So instead of talking about the product, we're focused more on the prospect and learning about the prospect's needs. We try to learn about the prospect's needs by asking more questions. So instead of this is what I sell, do you need what I sell? It's more about how are things going today? What are you using today? What are your goals? And the goal is not to get prospects interested in what you sell. The goal primarily or first is to look for prospects that need what you sell, and then to make those prospects interested. And you try to make those prospects interested by providing your product as a solution to what they need. Now, if we look at sort of everybody that you can sell to, this isn't everybody in the country or everybody on the planet, but everybody in your sort of like target market, or everybody you come in contact with during your prospecting effort, you can usually slice them into this type of pie chart, with the bulk of the pie being prospects that just don't need what you sell. Either they're not the right size, they already use someone today, they don't have any money and never will. And then the next largest pie piece is there could possibly be a need. And then the next smaller piece is that there is a need. And the smallest slice of the pie is that there's a need right now. And what a product selling salesperson might do is they might, because they're just selling the product and not taking as much time to learn about the prospect, they typically try to sell to everybody. Now, don't get me wrong. Now, of course, at some point, a product selling salesperson might disqualify a lead as not being the right fit. But out of the gate, let me give you an example. Out of the gate, a product selling salesperson might try to schedule appointments with the entire pie, meaning prospects that don't need what they sell. And that leads to more resistance, more objections. And when you do schedule meetings with prospects that don't need what you sell, it leads to wasted time for both the salesperson and the prospect. The consultative salesperson in every interaction will focus more on the prospect to learn about them, and thus will focus on the smaller slices of the pie, which are prospects that may need what they sell, there is a need or there is a need now, and they're able to find out those details by asking more questions and having a more consultative approach. Let me give you an example comparing these two methodologies or selling approaches to one another. And a lot of times I like to use selling a gym membership as an example, because it's just very easy for us all to relate to and get our hands around. But let's say that someone walks into a gym to take a tour or to possibly buy a membership, and they are received by a product selling salesperson. What that might look like is the product selling salesperson might greet them and almost immediately after getting their maybe personal information, the salesperson will take them on a tour of the facility. Here are our treadmills, here are our weights, here's our steam room, lap pool, and we have some yoga classes. And what they're doing in that process is they're showing the product, which basically is the product selling approach. This is who I work for, this is what I sell. After that, they'll maybe take them to the office and show some membership packages and try to close the sale. Now, comparing that to a consultative selling approach might look like this, where the prospect walks in and this consultative salesperson sits down with that person for about 15-20 minutes to learn what brought them in. What goals are they? What goals do they have? What are they trying to improve? What do they like that they're currently doing? And they will ask a variety of questions to understand what's going on with the prospect. After that, they give the prospect a tour, which could be the equivalent of a demonstration of a product in B2B selling. And the nice thing about this approach is that not only are they able to qualify the prospect in terms of how likely they are to buy, but they can also determine how much time they want to spend giving the tour. They can also tailor the tour to the prospect's exact needs. If the prospect is focused on improving cardiovascular health, the salesperson can focus on how the product can help with that particular need. And after that, they can then show them the membership options and try to close the sale. The difference between the two is that the product selling salesperson is going to spend most of the time talking about the product, for example, treadmills, weight machines, and classes, and the consultative salesperson might be talking about things like improving one's life, getting healthier, decreasing medical costs, improving self-confidence, improving personal relationships, because those are all benefits that result from using the product. So when it's time to close the sale will be much easier for the salesperson that's talking about life transformation compared to the salesperson that's talking about weights and treadmills, and comparing that against a monthly membership. So now if we look at the two side by side, you can see the product selling is talking about the company, the product, features, and pricing, and just trying to close the sale or validate interest. The consultative salesperson focuses more on benefits, problems, asking questions to see if problems exist, customer examples. When they do talk about the product, it's all about features, differentiation, ROI, bragging points about the company. So when you look at that, this is what I was getting to earlier, which is to say product selling could be easier when you're just trying to figure out what do I need to say in this exact moment, because it is a little more complicated and sophisticated to think about the benefits that the product delivers to the buyer, that the problems that they may have, figuring out good questions to ask, customer examples and whatnot. So it takes an effort to stop what you're doing and organize your thoughts and maybe get those on paper to build your consultative selling sales message. So product selling can be done with more improvisation. Consultative selling, if you want to do it properly, you need to kind of prepare a little bit more on the front end. The good news is that while product selling might be a little easier, consultative selling is easier in the long run, because you will face much less objections, reluctance, resistance, rejection. So the last thing I want to point out on this is that a lot of times when people hear consultative selling, they often may think that, well, that's for technical products like IT or software or something that's very complicated, and that if they have a simple product that they just need to do product selling. The reality is that you could have the most sophisticated, complicated product, and think that you're doing consultative selling, but really you're just going out and talking about the product. Meaning you could sell IT services, IT consulting, but still just have a very product selling approach where, hey, I sell IT consulting. Do you need IT consulting? We're the largest provider of IT consulting, and all you do is talk about the product. So it doesn't. You can do product selling with technical products. You could also do consultative selling with very simple products. Let's just take the most simple product at all. Let's say you sell hot dogs at a sports arena. You could technically, I'm not saying you should do this because it's more of an impulse purchasing a hot dog, but you could apply the consultative selling approach to selling a hot dog. By asking the buyer, do you usually eat hot dogs? What kind of hot dogs do you like? What type of toppings do you like on your hot dogs? When was the last time you had a hot dog? Do you have any concerns about the hot dogs you're currently eating? What are some things you're looking for with when you purchase something to eat? What are some other things that you might be considering instead of a hot dog? So you can use the consultative approach with any product. It doesn't have to be a very complex or product that is around consulting. So now, while I said it will take a little bit of work to build your consultative message, and consultative selling is a little bit more difficult, the good news is that with the smart selling sales system, it's much easier to build your message because we take you through a structured process. If you were to try to adopt a consultative selling approach without these 3 levels and without the smart sales system, it might be difficult, and it might take you years of building up experience in your particular industry selling your product in order to be a really good consultative selling salesperson. The good news is that you could be brand new to your area, brand new to your role, and if you just follow the steps of the smart sales system, you can adopt a consultative selling approach and you can build a consultative message, which is what we're going to focus on next when we focus on level 1. And we'll take you through a structured process to build your message, and that is what we're going to do next week. So I'd encourage you to, when we meet next week, what I would recommend is be prepared to work on your consultative sales message during the session, as you're reading those chapters in the book, and and after that session. So my recommendation would be to build your message and create your scripts as we're talking about those topics in this webinar series, as opposed to coming back to that at the end or later down the road. What that'll do is that'll prevent you from having to come back. It will also help the other modules when we get it into the level 3 training modules where we're talking about cold calling and emailing and all that. It'll make more sense to you when you're able to use your message and your scripts when we're talking about those concepts, and you can apply the tips and concepts specifically to your situation. So that's pretty much it. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube and you found this to be helpful, please return the favor by liking, commenting, or sharing this video. That helps us tremendously. If you want more help and want to start implementing the smart sales system, an easy way to look at it and an easy way to think about implementing it is it's a 3-legged stool. The first leg is the sales methodology, and that's what we're providing here in this 15-week webinar series. You can also get a lot of this content on our YouTube channel. We deliver training recorded, and we also deliver live training if you're interested in that. The second leg is the software platform of SalesScripter, which aligns with the sales methodology. And the third leg is professional services. So we definitely provide sales consulting and sales coaching to help you either get your strategy and get your message in place, or to work with you ongoing, working through your challenges and path to improvement. If you have any questions, here is my direct information. Feel free to email me directly, follow me on Twitter, and if